Hi YouTube, my name is Louis, I'm from South Africa and today is going to be my first YouTube video. I want to do a shop tour because I think this is probably the most logical way to start before doing any projects, so that you guys can have a look and see what I'm working with and what I have to my disposal. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take you through the shop in a normal fashion like anybody else does it. Start on the one side and finish on the next. So I'm going to get behind the camera and I'll take you through step by step. So if you would like to see what I'm doing here and what I've got going on, stick around and I'll take you through. Okay, so like I promised, I'm now standing behind the camera and I'm going to take you through a roundabout shot to give you an idea of the space and where the general placement of the tools and machines are, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. So on the right hand side you can see the garage door, and just to note that this is it's still a functioning garage. My wife still parks the car inside when I'm not busy working here. The first big tool as you enter, it's the double back dust extractor. Moving along, you'll see in the background clamp racks on the wall. Then there's the disc sander, the spindle sander, a small little belt strip sander, an edge sander, and then closer to the camera you'll see the sliding table saw. In the corner at the back you'll find the lathe. There's also a miter saw hanging on the wall. Then in the middle of the shop is the workbench with some drawers at the bottom, built on the Ron Polk design, but of course the bottom side completely different. And then on the back wall there's some wall cabinets to take all the power tools. Below that just normal hand tools. Cordless drill station next to that. Then as we come to the third wall, there's a thickness planer in the corner. Then there's a drum sander. Next to it is the router table. Then a floor standing drill press, a jet planer thicknesser, a bandsaw, and then right in the end you'll find that there is the spray station, or the paint station if you will. This is where I mix paints and stains. And then right above that you'll find the compressor. The compressor is wall mounted, so if I can just turn this a little bit like this, so you'll see that the compressor is hanging on the wall. And then there's of course the pneumatic lines. So if I just go back with this slightly elevated, just to give you an idea of the dust removal. So 4-inch dust removal system hanging off the ceiling, so 2 lines coming across with various drops. And then in the back there, let me see if I can point this out. Yeah, there in the back, another line running across. They're all 4-inch, coming all the way back. Various drops, as you can see, all come back to this octopus looking attachment coming to the dust extractor. So this allows me to have up to 4 floodgates open at a time, as long as they're not on one single line. So that is, they can be on 3 different lines, so I can have 3 floodgates open and the system still has enough airflow to work sufficient. Okay, so the next thing is I'm going to take the camera off my little homemade tripod stand, and I'm going to walk you through, and then I'll take you through a bit of detail, and then we see where we end up. Okay, so now I'm in handheld mode, and I'll try to keep this thing as stable as I possibly can, moving through the shop. But as you can see, okay, so we've got a dust extraction unit here. So normal standard dust bags at the bottom, but I did replace the filters, which was the bag type filter on top, with these cartridge filters. And they seem to work a lot better than the factory fitted bags. Then yeah, I mentioned the 4 ports going to the rest of the shop, and yeah, like I mentioned previously, you as long as the floodgates are open on 3 different lines, it still works. It still works fine. And then I've got a small little attachment next to the plugs there, the one with the light, and this is the receiver for my homemade switch, so I can turn on the dust extractor remotely. So this had to be homemade because we live in a country where we work off 220 volts, and yeah, these things are not readily available for 220. So even if I imported it, it would be 110 volts, so that wouldn't work. So yeah, this was a home built project by my cousin, and yeah, this seems to be working fine. Then moving along this side, this is the sliding table saw. This is the European style saw, so I have opted for a saw like this for various reasons. And I know that these types of saws are not very popular on YouTube. I really don't see them, especially not from people in the States. Yeah, that there they tend to want to go more for the cabinet style saw. So this is a saw that has a sliding table, so table slides from front to back. So the advantage of this is, well, basically there's 2 main advantages. The first is if you want to edge some solid stock, and it's very rough. So something with a live edge or something that you don't take to the jointer to make straight, you can simply hold it down on this table and slide it across the blade. And then the second very, very big advantage is, of course, very easy cross cutting, to such an extent that I have decided to take my miter saw and hang it against the wall. So I hardly ever use a miter saw since I got this. So the requirements when I bought this new saw was basically to have a tool with a sliding table, as well as something with a scoring blade. So if I can get in here, let me just see if I can get in here. Oh, there at the bottom, not so clear, but anyways, there's a scoring blade at the bottom there, so if you cut any veneer or melamine type board, then you can cut chip free. It's a 12-inch blade, so this gives me a little bit more cutting depth, which also was one of the requirements. So I can go up to close to 4 inches or 100 millimeters on this kind of blade. And then of course a nice sturdy rib fence. And the other very, very big requirement from my side was a fence that can pull back, so that when you do cross cutting, you don't get stuck between the blade and the fence. So by loosening this over here, this can slide all the way to the back, which means that you can have this at a point where the stock will never get caught between the blade and the fence. Okay, so yeah, maybe I'll do a more in-depth review of the saw. This is called the Minimax SC2 Classic. It's running off 220 volts, and like I mentioned, we have 220 volt as a standard in South Africa. There's no 110 outlets available. So all tools that you'll see runs off 220, but this one has the 3 horsepower single phase motor. Okay, so moving on, then clamp racks. I've had some requests from people on Instagram to have a better view of the clamp racks. So basically the longer clamps hang in a vertical position, and then the other ones just flat against the wall. Yes, it takes up a lot of space. I'm aware of this, but I'm not so worried about space. So it looks neat, and I can find them quite easily. And then at the bottom, there is all sorts of cabinets, and as I go through, you'll see that there's 2 things that's very clear. The one thing is I'm a firm believer in having things on wheels, and secondly, I love putting things in drawers, not big drawers where stuff gets piled on top of each other, but yeah, organized shallower drawers where things can go each thing in its place. So just going through, I'm not going to open all these. I'll probably bore you to death, but things like this would have in okay, and then on this side, like I said, millions of drawers. I'm not going to go through them all. I'll just open a couple. And then on top of these units, disc sander. This is a 300 millimeter, which is, what is that, 12 inches. Next to this, oscillating spindle sander, also with drawers below this. Then moving along, this is the strip sander, very useful for, especially when I do metal work, to clean off burrs off the steel. I initially bought it so that I can make a knife with my son, but it's actually very useful for all sorts of sanding and grinding tasks. And then below it, this is all the bolts and nuts and things like this. And then this is something that I haven't really seen anywhere on YouTube before, but this is a standard. It's a standard 6x9 belt disc sander, but I've taken the disc off completely. So the disc normally gets mounted there. It has a table across and it has a disc, but I've completely turned this on its side. So in order to have a 90-degree between this table here and this belt there. So this is set to 90 degrees, which means now it's an edge sander that I can use to edge sand longer pieces. So I've removed the disc sander part of it completely because, like you've seen before, there is a dedicated disc sander right there. So this one then, very novel way of doing it. I haven't seen anybody do this before. And then above this, my miter saw, which is just hanging off the wall. Oh, by the way, these are all French cleat systems. So all these brackets can be moved at any time. If I want to change the layout, they're just hanging on that blue strip is a French cleat. So the miter saw is hanging on the wall, so I can easily take it off if I want to use it for something. But like I said, with the sliding saw, the miter saw really is obsolete in the shop. To be honest with you, I considered selling it, and I couldn't get the price. So at the moment, it's just hanging there. Then in the corner, variable speed lathe, which I don't use too often, but nonetheless, it's all ready to go. Then on this wall, I've got my wall cabinets, which is housing all sorts of consumables as well as my power tools. Now the big challenge over here, if I move across, is that the gap here from the edge of the workbench to these cabinets, this gap is not very big. It's probably only like 1.1 meters, which is a little bit more than 3 feet. But so what ended up happening is, as I was standing around here, and if I left the door open and I turn around, I walk right into the door, and I didn't like that. So I opted for something else, and what I did is basically doing the door in 2 pieces, and then having it flip up with a couple of gas lifts. So if I open this up, you will see that basically what happens is this swings and then it flips, and then the gas lifts would basically hold this open, and the top of this is low enough so that I can walk underneath it without hitting my head, and this really solved that problem completely. Now this door, this wall consists of cabinets which all has then this functionality, and a little bit difficult here with one hand, but as you can see, they all just flip up. Okay, so on the bottom side, what I did is I bought these clip, uh, I don't know what you would call them, but it's basically for brooms and things like this. And I have all my hand tools mounted on this, so it's easy to remove this, and it keeps it fairly neat. And then, of course, then there's the measuring stuff and the chisels, and this also is hinged so that it can open. So this swings open, so that there's more space inside to put all the stuff I don't use regularly. So this can just open and close. So now you can see all these doors are now open, and I've been walking underneath them without any hassle. Then moving along, what we have is the cordless station. So this is where I keep my cordless tools, battery chargers. I've got some 12-volt tools and some 22 volts. And then in the corner here is a 15-inch planer thicknesser, which I don't use often because I've got another one like you'll see, but I keep this for the really heavy work. When I've got big batches of timber to plane, I will pull this thing out because it's a big 3 horsepower beast. So it tends to do better with the bigger, wider stuff, but it's not so good with snipe. It does snipe a little bit, so I really don't like to use it for dimensioning or for finishing. So I'll use it for the rough stuff. And then on the wall here, face tool tracks, squares, steel rules, things like that. Then moving along is the 1632 drum sander, also on a cabinet with wheels, and inside just all the sandpapers and things like this. Then next to that is the router table, and this houses permanently I think it's a 3 1/4 horse Triton router at the bottom. I never take it off because for handheld work, as I showed you there in the cabinet, I've got a Makita ones. So on this one, I've got a Triton, and it's just staying there all the time. And then above that, some shelving. Then I have the floor standing drill press. Let me just back up a little bit so we can get into the shot. So that's a floor standing drill press, and then below that I have a cabinet holding all the drill bits, fastener bits, everything that goes with the drill press. And next to that is a 10-inch jet planer thicknesser, which is my primary machine, but except for the big batches. So yeah, quite happy with that one. And then lastly, on the machine side is an 18-inch bandsaw, which I don't use nearly often enough, but yeah, I got it and I enjoy it. And then lastly, you saw this in the opening scene where the compressor is mounted against the wall. I've got some brackets there for the spray guns, and then the line that gets pulled out when I spray. I need to spray outside, I can't spray inside, so generally I will take this tarpaulin, I will open it up on the driveway so I don't get all sorts of overspray on the driveway. And then one thing that I forgot on this side, if I just turn all the way back, is the gas bottle on top. This is for my MIG welder. I decided to put the bottle right there out of the corner, in the corner out of the way, so that I can just clip the pipe on and I don't have to carry the bottle around all the time. So now I'm going to take you to the bench in the middle that I mentioned previously. It's basically a Ron Polk bench, but what I did is I added some solid legs. Those legs are probably about 5 inches or so, and they are solid pine. And on the sides I have some big caster wheels, which enables me to move this thing around and get it out of the way, because like I mentioned before, the bench needs to move to get the wife's car in. And then I've got a homemade tail vise on here. It's basically just a big screw thread with a block of wood on the front, and that's a vise. And then at the back, two normal steel vices, and also with the blocks for the pegs. So this is basically the workbench. There's some drawers on this side. And then of course these homemade blocks that I made, and they fit into these holes that I use for when I clamp stuff down. Okay, so this is basically then the workshop, and I hope that you enjoy it. I would welcome some comments and questions. So yeah, if you put it in the comment section below, I'll be glad to have a look at it, and hope to hear from you. Thanks, man. Bye.